It's not always easy to find love at the center. There is not a set of instructions numbered 1 through 7 or maybe 8. It is not always easy to find love at the center. Yet we are here to practice putting love at the center, to take deep breaths of fresh air, to breathe in the newness of each day so our minds and our hearts and our spirits will be continuously renewed. It is not always easy, but together we can remember. Love will guide us if we open ourselves to the challenges which love requires of us. May we accept this challenge with dignity and grace. Amen. And I invite you to rise or sit with gusto as we sing together, Love Will Guide Us.
Is it warm enough for you? It's summer, right? Okay, I'm from Houston. It feels like Houston outside. That's hot. Good morning, All Souls.
Good morning.
My name is Greta Goodwin, and I am your worship associate this morning. My pronouns are she, her. For more than 200 years, our congregation has sought to live up to the vision inherent in our name, All Souls. Together, we embrace our mission to create a diverse, spirit-growing, justice-seeking, beloved community that transforms ourselves and our world into one great family of all souls. We are a Unitarian Universalist congregation, diverse in many ways, but united in our belief in the inherent worth and dignity of every person, and in the obligation to express our faith through acts of justice and compassion. You are welcome here, no matter who you are, where you come from, how you identify, or who you love. You are welcome here. If you're visiting us for the first time or you still feel new, please raise your hand in person or on the Zoom so we can give you an All Souls welcome. Do we have any visitors? Please join us for coffee and tea in the Reeb lobby, which is through these doors to your left. Also, our weekly bulletin is a great way to find out about the latest news for All Souls, so you can sign up through the link on our homepage. Today, we honor the great legacy of both indigenous and enslaved peoples at this international crossroads, now called Washington, D.C. For generations, Piscataway tribes have been the traditional caretakers of our bioregion. The people of the waters lived along the Anacostia and Potomac rivers. Our church has occupied 3 sites on stolen Native American lands within unjust systems that continue to benefit from Black and immigrant labor. The heritage of all these ancestors is still here in this region and in our congregation. Our land acknowledgement sets an intention to educate ourselves and acknowledge that something must be done to repair the harm. Our commitments to the beloved community and to the 8th principle also calls us to that doing. We are working with the All Souls Social Justice Ministries to make ideological solidarity concrete. Now I invite you to greet one another. On Zoom, you can go to the gallery view, turn on your camera if you're willing and able. In the sanctuary, feel free to get up and move around as you are comfortable. And yes, it's hot, so we understand. But let's take some time now to greet each other. Let's continue our conversations after service. And again, we welcome you to All Souls.
During coffee or tea after the service, but right now I want to invite our younger friends forward to have a little time for all ages together. Henry, welcome back. Hello. Come on. Oh, yeah. So, oh, this is great. So every week I'm going to try to learn another one of your names and an interest. And I'll just say if the adults are paying attention, they're also trying to learn these names and interests. So would one or two of you, let's say two, be willing to introduce yourselves to me this week by sharing a name and something you like? Yes.
My name's
Jonah,
Jonah and I like Kirby.
you like Kirby. What is Kirby?
It's a video that I really like.
And is it like an adventure one?
Yeah, it's like an adventure because there are 8 types of worlds.
That sounds really great. Thank you. And were you about to introduce yourself to me?
I like to play Rose.
You like to play what?
Rose.
Rose. Rose is very friendly. I like to meet her this morning. That was great. And would you share your name with me too? Elliot likes to sleep. I have to say, amen. Amen. All right, so thank you, Jonah and Elliot. So I'm Reverend Anastasia again, and do you know what's actually really helpful? It's helpful to know each other's names. And I know I have a long name, but actually kids are really good at learning languages, so I think you'll be able to learn it and help the congregation learn it too. So it's 5 syllables, and every A is an ah sound, and it's zia at the end. So I'm gonna say it, and then I'm gonna invite you all to say it. Sound good? Anastasia. Anastasia. Thank you. So last week when we were meeting each other, sort of for the first time, I didn't even get to share with you what I'm doing here, which is a pretty important thing to share. And I have a title or a name for my job that no other minister has ever had here before. I'm a developmental minister. And each of those words is important. Developmental is like to develop or grow up or learn or change. And that word, development, I really think applies to a lot of the grown-ups here because they want our church to be a church that learns to do some new things. Like, how do we take care of this beautiful building? How do we pay our bills and on time? How do we hold difference without getting like really mean to one another, right? How can we have different opinions and still be kind and loving? How can we make rules about how we make decisions and know what each of us does so things can go a little bit more smoothly because we know what we're all about? So those are some of the things the grown-ups are seeking to learn. And here's the thing I have to tell you. You kids are great learners. But starting at about 25 to 30, our brains get not so great at learning. We can learn new information, but we're not good at learning new ways to think or new ways to how to do things. All of which to say is, as the grown-ups are learning, sometimes learning and growth, it's a little challenging, so they're gonna need your kindness and also your encouragement. And that reminds me when my son Benjamin was 3, that was his first year where his class hatched and released butterflies. And they took the butterflies when they were ready to the park to release them. And they opened the little door and the butterflies all flew away except for one. One just stayed in there. And my little son Benjamin went up and he said, "You can do it. You can do hard things too." And the whole class was like, "Oh, yes, you can do it. You can do hard things too." And after enough encouragement, the butterfly flew on its way. So just remember, if things seem hard here at church, remember to tell the grown-ups around you that they could do hard things too. Hold on, Jonah, because we're going to get to a part where I'm going to ask you questions. Now, the other word, so I'm developmental, the word for grown-ups, and then there's next word, minister. And I actually think that's the really important word for you. Now, a couple of years ago, we were talking as a church about how we cannot be a beloved community unless we're a multi-generational community. That means we can't be a beloved community if we're missing a whole group of people, like we're missing our kids, or missing the old people, or even the people older than the old people, and all the people in between. And we were talking about, like, what does it mean to join a church and be a member? And my daughter, Sadie, had all these questions about it because she's super smart. And at the end, she said, well, I can pledge for my allowance and give money and make a plan for that. And I could help out on some committees. I don't know much about budgeting, so I don't think the finance committee makes sense. And I'm probably not old enough yet for the board. I probably don't know everything I would need to know at age 10. And she said, but I do think kids should get to vote on things such as who their minister is, because who their minister is really affects kids' experience of church. And so I was so curious, what do you think what would you hope a minister is? How do you think a minister can make a church better for you? What are some thoughts? Yeah, Jonah.
Well, it was something with the butterflies that happened in my kindergarten class. So it was the same thing. One butterfly didn't want to go, but then it took off.
I'm so glad your butterfly went on its journey too. So what are some reasons why a minister might be important for you? Have you ever thought about that before? So you want to know what? If you don't know the answer yet, that's actually a kind of beautiful thing, because that means there's a lot for us to discover coming up. And one of the things that I know is that being your minister is one of the best jobs I could possibly have, because two things really get to happen. One, I get to see all the things you're involved in, not only this year, but year after year, and learn about you. And I'm kind of going to learn your story of growing up. And do you know where I hold those stories? I don't write them up in a document, but I carry them on, there's this term, on the tablet of my heart. And so I carry your story with me. And the other thing I get to do is bless you. I get to bless you with you do baby dedications. I saw some cuties here today. And when you do coming of age and bridging into adulthood, all of those moments and others, I get to bless you, which means sending all the good wishes from all the people in this community right through me and into you. And do you know what? When someone blesses someone else, they feel blessed in return because they're part of something so good. So I know that's part of our story up ahead. And if you get a sense over time of what a minister is or should be, you could talk to me about that too. So I want us all to think about that. And as we transition into our next moment, you could join your families back in the pews, or you could go with Miss Laura down to your activities as we sing together, Sia Hamba.
Good morning, All Souls. My name is Kirsten Lodel, she, her, and you are welcome to call me Kiki. I have been part of the All Souls community for many years in many different capacities, and I am so honored and excited to now be stepping into a new role on the All Souls team called Congregational Care Coordinator. All right, thank you. Over the coming year, we will all be working together to actualize a long-held vision at All Souls of creating a true congregational care system that undergirds everything that we do together in this beloved community. And you may notice that we're using the term congregational care, not pastoral care, because the idea is that we care for one another. We give care to, and we receive care from each other. It's hard for me to imagine a more important and sacred commitment that we make to each other when we commit to be a part of a congregation. Over the coming weeks, I'll want to hear your ideas for how we can start to expand and deepen our shared ministry of care. I have started learning about the very thoughtful work that was done by many of you, helmed in part by Michael Milano, who I see right here, back in 2019 and 2020 before COVID hit, to articulate this vision of a lay-led system of care. I am loving learning about all the amazing peer-to-peer, congregant-to-congregant care that has long been happening at All Souls, and that is happening right now. And I'm eager for us to learn from other congregations that have successfully built the kind of congregation-wide caring culture that we now envision for All Souls, both within Unitarian Universalism and representing other traditions. Much more to come, and I'll be preaching about caring culture on August 4th. For now, hello, and hello again. Please come visit with me after the service. I'll be hanging out at the caring card table. And let's do this, okay? All right. I don't have many answers for what we do in the face of such a broken and hurting world, other than to lean into one another, to care for our people, and to let our people care for us. So let's do this. Moving to announcements, I want to reiterate the invitation to book individual time with Reverend Anastasia, whose name we all now know how to pronounce. Thank you. As you're likely already sensing, she is highly approachable and wonderfully open, and she really, really does want to meet you. She has set up a very easy way to book one-on-one appointments right off of our website. If you go to the homepage, you'll see a big welcome from Reverend Zinke. Click on that, and it will take you to a page where you'll see a bright green button that says schedule a meeting, and it's easy as that. This will be an ongoing invitation, so if the summer is not the best time, book a meeting with her in the fall. Can I just say, how happy are we to have Reverend Anastasia as our developmental minister? Thank you. Even in the summer, there continue to be so many ways to get more involved at All Souls. So as Greta said, please be sure that you are receiving our Friday newsletter. And I'll highlight just a few things now. First off, I want to give a shout out and a huge thank you to our garden volunteers who braved the heat and humidity yesterday to love on our green spaces and do a lot of weeding. Talk about showing care. Do we have any of our gardeners here today? All right. Thank you. Everyone is welcome to join what we're calling our Summer Pickup Choir, which has been blessing us with our music today. All you have to do is come to the sanctuary at 9:20, before a Sunday service. Music will be distributed, you'll rehearse, and then you'll sing in the service that same morning. It is a perfect opportunity for anyone who has ever thought about dipping a toe into our amazing music ministry. More information's in the newsletter. And if you have ever felt called to support our children and youth ministry, and how could you not after seeing That Time for All Ages, we will be hosting several info sessions this summer about opportunities to volunteer in our religious education program in the coming year. Join us online at 7 p.m. on July 18th, August 8th, or August 29th. Sign-up information's in the newsletter. And beginning this Wednesday, July 17th, which marks the 4th anniversary of the passing of Congressman and civil rights leader John Lewis, our REAB Project for Voting Rights will be hosting a week-long festival of voting rights action, kicking off Wednesday evening with an event at Black Lives Matter Plaza. Then there will be phone banking on Thursday, postcarding after worship next Sunday, and more phone banking next Tuesday. And you guessed it, more information is in the newsletter. All right. If you are concerned about the state of our democracy, and I imagine many of us are, get involved with the REAB Project. Turning now to the joys and concerns of our community, we extend our collective care to member Whit Allen, whose mother, Connie, was diagnosed with breast cancer last week. Whit welcomes prayers of healing and encouragement for Connie, and a caring card will be available to sign for Connie after today's service at the caring card table in the lobby. I invite you now to lift up the names of those that you are carrying on your hearts today. You may place them in the chat if you're joining us on Zoom. We welcome those names. And we lift up concern for our country and our world at a time of seemingly unceasing violence. We're all still trying to make sense of the assassination attempt on a former president and current presidential candidate yesterday evening. We mourn the loss of life and send healing wishes to those injured. And we affirm that as a people of faith that places love at the center, as a people of a faith that places love at the center, a faith that has been deeply shaped by abolitionism, pacifism, Gandhian satyagraha, and Black Christian nonviolence, that there is no place in our democracy for political violence. We invoke the words of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., whose concept of beloved community sits at the center of our mission here at All Souls. Speaking at Riverside Church in 1967 as war raged in Vietnam and political violence against civil rights leaders was escalating in the United States, Dr. King said, "And yet, we still have a choice today. Nonviolent coexistence or violent co-annihilation. We still have a choice today." Please join me for a time of prayer our meditation. I will offer some words and then we'll flow right into the singing of Spirit of Life, followed by a time of held silence, and then we'll conclude our prayer. So settle in with me. Let's take a couple of deep breaths. Spirit of life and of love, Spirit of mercy, Spirit of peace. We assemble today, each one of us carrying so much in our hearts and on our shoulders. Pain and joy and love and confusion. And part of why we come here is because we're trying to figure out how to hold it all. And we recognize that we cannot hold it alone. Please let this time of communal worship be a balm to our aching hearts so that they may stay soft and open. Please help us channel our anger, our frustration, and even our fear into a good and loving trouble that would make beloved ancestors like John Lewis and James Reeb proud. Please enable us to be generous with our empathy, even when that empathy makes us deeply uncomfortable. We long for a just peace in our lives and in our country and in our world. May we stay faithful to this longing in our testimony, in our witness, and in our actions. Spirit of life and of love, help us strengthen one another for the journey before us. And may compassion and care be our watchwords as we continue to pray and labor for a peaceful and just world for all. May it be so.
Amen. A Ritual to Read to Each Other by William Stafford. If you don't know the kind of person I am, and I don't know the kind of person you are, a pattern that others made may prevail in the world, and following the wrong God home, we may miss our star. For there's many a small betrayal in the mind, a shrug that lets the fragile sequence break, sending with shouts the horrible errors of childhood storming out to play through the broken dike. And as elephants parade holding each other's tail, but if one wanders, the circus won't find the park. I call it cruel, and maybe the root of all cruelty. To know what occurs, but not recognize the fact. And so, I appeal to a voice, to something shadowy, a remote, important region in all who talk. Though we could fool each other, we should consider, lest the parade of our mutual life get lost in the dark. For it is important that awake people be awake, or a breaking line may discourage them back to sleep. The signals we give, yes, or no, or maybe, should be clear. The darkness around us is deep.
Poems need to be heard at least twice. A Ritual to Read to Each Other by William Stafford. If you don't know the kind of person I am, and I don't know the kind of person you are, a pattern that others made may prevail in the world, and following the wrong God home, we may miss our star. For there is many a small betrayal in the mind, a shrug that lets the fragile sequence break, sending with shouts the horrible errors of childhood storming out to play through the broken dike. And as elephants parade, holding each elephant's tail, but if one wanders, the circus won't find the park. I call it cruel, and maybe the root of all cruelty, to know what occurs, but not recognize the fact. And so I appeal to a voice, something shadowy, a remote, important region in all who talk. Though we could fool each other, we should consider, lest the parade of our mutual life get lost in the dark. For it is important for awake people to be awake, or a breaking line may discourage them back to sleep. The signals we give, yes or no, or maybe, should be clear. The darkness around us is deep. One of the advantages that our ancestors had was that they knew less in terms of quantity, but they often knew it better in terms of quality. And I was an English major, and so one of the things that I learned in those studies was that people used to have way fewer books, if any, but they knew passages by heart. Inspired by their example, and understanding what it means to be accompanied by wisdom, I began to form a small canon of poems that I learned by heart. This poem was the very first. And have you ever missed something that was right in front of you? I mean, I knew this poem, And yet I had never really considered what the word ritual in the title meant, and what it really might be connoting or inviting in terms of how we were meant to use it. I mean, I had some sense, but it really struck me this week, and so I actually did research on the nature and the significance of ritual. And here is what I learned. A ritual is a process used by an individual or a group which allows each participant to increase health through furthering understanding, celebrating, grieving, or taking action. Although the structure is planned, the outcome for each person may be different. Rituals build group resiliency through encouraging individual health. Rituals provide structure for working through difficult times. Rituals bridge people home to their community. Rituals are planned time for gaining strength. Rituals support various viewpoints on a topic or an event. Rituals release emotions, tensions, reduce toxicity. Through rituals, each person is seen accurately by others in their full humanity. Now, I'm sure some of you, in just hearing that, could already realize how valuable rituals can be to the health of a community like our congregation. And I will be honest that I build a generous amount of ritual into worship life, so we have that to look forward to. And this poem is itself a ritual, or instructions to a ritual, in which we speak specific words to one another. Words that direct us or remind us of essential practices for holding our community together. The first reminder is this: if you don't know the type of person I am, and I don't know the type of person you are, if you don't know the type of person I am, and I don't know the type of person you are. So many times in the course of my ministry, when I thought it or my congregation were somehow going sideways, I would reflect too often alone how we had gotten there. And in one of those tender nights of the wounded soul, the wisdom of this line of poetry would come back to me. Had we truly taken the time to get to know one another? So often I saw whatever conflict we were in had its roots in not fully understanding each other. Let me tell you an example of the difference it makes when we take the time to get to know one another. I met Sharon at the very first board meeting of my very first year in ministry, in which I was probably more eager puppy than woman. And it was at this very first meeting that Sharon, hearing that I would have a committee on ministry to guide me, responded with what I could only perceive, in shock, as a threat. She insisted, instead of that committee, for a committee that would, quote, watch over and hold a big stick over the minister, unquote. She then looked me dead in the eye and said, "We've been hurt before, and we will not be hurt again." Over the next few months, Sharon began inviting what would turn out to be the majority of the board into secret meetings to discuss the viability of my ministry and corrections needed theretowards. Now, the toxicity of the situation was not lost on me. One colleague I consulted said that she expected I would be fired before the end of my second year and I would never work as a minister again. That was a good first year, right? But 3 months after that first board meeting with Sharon, at my invitation, I sat down with her and with the board members who were most concerned. And I invited them to share with me what she meant when she said that they had been hurt before. Sharon shared that, among other things, a past minister had slept with one of the congregation's youth. Not only a huge breach of trust and professional ethics, but a crime for which he was incarcerated. Sharon's daughter had been in that youth group with that youth who she had known since being a young child. And Sharon's daughter never walked through the doors of our church again. I shared hearing that and the many other things they had to tell, that in my professional guidelines, I was required not to speak critically of a colleague in public, but that I was angry about what had occurred, and that I would process that anger outside of the congregation, where it belonged. And after that sit-down meeting, those secret pseudo-board meetings ended. But honestly, the board meetings themselves continued to be miserable. Sharon would make these ongoing accusations and fearful predictions, including that I would rob the endowment to fund a Children's Defense Fund Freedom School. The summer program happened year after year with no money from our endowment. But the hostility made the work so much harder and less joyful. Then one day, Sharon and I were both randomly attending a workshop during which we were learning about asset mapping. What assets does a community have? How can we connect and track them? Mostly the examples offered by the facilitator were of concrete, tangible things. For instance, someone has a spare tea kettle, and another person is an out-of-work chef. And coming together, these help make a hospitality ministry possible. We were asked to write down on little slips of paper something that we thought we could bring to our church as part of an asset mapping exercise. I don't remember what I wrote. But Sharon wrote on her piece of paper just one thing: critical analysis. I asked her about it, and she said she didn't really think she had much to offer. But she was trained as a lawyer and in critical thinking, and she thought she was actually really helping us in making our plans more solid when she challenged us and our thinking and where we were coming from. And from that day forward, I always honored that she thought at each of those moments that she was bringing her gift. And I was much more open to what she had to say. And then about a year after that, so a year and a half into my ministry, Sharon came to meet with me. She shared that she knew the congregation had asked their minister to help them grow in numbers and grow younger and add families, and overall for just a sense of vibrancy again. And she noted that all of those things had happened. And then she added, but she didn't expect that our congregation would have to change to make them happen. She added, I feel like I'm losing my church. And I looked at her, myself feeling so much tenderness and love and empathy. And I shared how she had stayed in our church through so many periods of misconduct and grief and conflict and loss. I really hoped that she could stay in this church and experience the joy and life that were there now. The joy and life that I think she had been holding out for. And stayed she did, though more on the periphery, and I was always the one they sent to talk to her about anything going forward. But she also released her fear and suspicion. I think she had come to know the kind of person I am, and I knew the kind of person she was. Beloveds, we need to know each other truly. The poem continues, "If you don't know the kind of person I am, and I don't know the kind of person you are, a pattern others made may prevail in the world." We need to know each other specifically here at All Souls because there are particular patterns that run through our history to this day that make us more vulnerable to distrust and reactivity and polarization. There are existing narratives that make us less likely to see each other's full humanity, understand each other's lived experiences, to know simply where the other person is coming from. Knowing each other well and generously is the best inoculation I know to seeing each other through the bias of our own perceptions. Let us come to know each other that well. Knowing each other specifically matters, and I urge us to pay attention for the patterns. Because the patterns are there: harm, suspicion, conflict, distrust, attacks on reputation, non-transparency, painful departures. In the 19 years that I have been in and out of All Souls and following you with love in my heart, I see the same things over and over again. The patterns continue, though the people in the patterns have changed. And sometimes when we focus too much on the individuals involved, not only do our hearts re-break for what occurred, but it obscures the patterns. Our fundamental work in this developmental ministry is not to let the patterns that other people made prevail within this congregation. I ask in all of my one-on-ones, what do you hope to see at All Souls in 5 years? A few people have answered that honestly, what they want is simply not to have another catastrophe in that time. In my hiring interview, I articulated a similar aim, that All Souls become a place where Paula Cole-Jones and other elders like her will never have to put the pieces of our community back together again. I hope that when we face such testing moments, and we will, that we could find a way not to go storming out through the broken dike. I hope and think that we could build enough trust that we might just be able to let a pattern of our own choosing prevail. And this is the ministry I want to do with you. To do so, in his poem, Stafford urges thoughtful and intentional communication. He writes, "I call it cruel, and maybe the root of all cruelty, to know what occurs but not recognize the fact. There are certain truths we need to be able to name. And he continues, "For it is important that awake people be awake, or a breaking line may discourage them back to sleep. The signals we give, yes or no or maybe, should be clear." There's an acronym that I like to use when I am being this intentional about communication: THINK. It comes from our UU trans religious professionals who urge folks to covenant to use THINK when engaging in transformational learning. And it goes like this: before I add to a conversation, I ask myself, think, is what I'm about to say thoughtful, T, thoughtful, H, honest, I, inspiring, by which we mean not charismatic, but rather does it inspire the group to take the next elegant step forward? N, is it necessary? Not just necessary to say, but necessary that I be the one to say it. And K, kind. Is it kind? Think may just serve us well, especially in congregational meetings. One last line from the poem. Following the wrong God home, we may miss our star. This is the dearest reminder to me in the poem. There are many things that we worship, positions for which we will put a stake in the ground. I don't seek to dishonor or dismiss any truths you find sacred. But I do invite us to look just beyond, a little further, for our star. Stars are meant to guide us to new lands, and our star is meant to guide us to beloved community. Let's go on that journey together. My dear ones, I am truly hopeful for our work together. I love us, and I believe in all souls. But when we reach a rocky time, I invite us to pull out this poem and reach for ritual. Remember, rituals build resiliency. They help us work through difficult events. They release tension. They call us back to each other. And according to Scientific American, rituals appear to benefit even people who claim to believe that rituals don't work. So join in, even if you are skeptical. We want you with us. It would not be a beloved community without you. Blessed be, and amen.
Thank you, Reverend Zinke. Thank you so very much. And I wasn't here last week, so I want to say welcome to All Souls. I want to say I really appreciated your words. We're going to go on this journey with you. We're going to go in faith and love and hope. So thank you. So today we were asked to reflect on the poem, A Ritual to Read to One Another. You know, reading to one another is a bonding. I love to have people read to me. I love to hear people's voices when they're talking, and when they're reading, I love to hear them take ownership over the words and make them their own. I always have. My mother had a very melodic, soothing kind of voice that my brother and I, we just always loved to hear her talk. She was also a singer. She was actually the lead for one of the choirs. So she sang a lot around the house. And when she would sing, we would often stop and just listen to her. We would also wonder why we were not blessed with the gift of being able to sing. We were not. We were not. Like most parents, she also read to us a lot when we were younger. And we were fortunate that she even read to us as we got older. If she ran across a poem or a book passage or a newspaper article that she thought was very well written, it had to be well written, she would call us and she'd go, "Listen to this. Let me read this to you." And we'd just stop. And it didn't matter what we were doing, we would listen to her read. And then, of course, being my mother, she would go, "What'd you think about that?" Because now we got to have a discussion about it. But we'd smile and we'd have the discussion. 3 of my favorite reading-focused shows: Reading Rainbow. Who remembers Reading Rainbow? Selected Shorts, and LeVar Burton Reads. I love to hear people read. Growing up, I remember anxiously awaiting to hear what the books LeVar Burton was going to talk about on that PBS show. As an aside, we were only allowed to watch PBS growing up. So you want to talk to me about anything on PBS, we can have a conversation. But he made those books come to life. And I cannot describe my glee when he started his podcast, LeVar Burton Reads. Again, every week, I waited to hear what kind of speculative fiction book or short story he was going to read. It was wonderful. And I was really sad when he decided to end that podcast. I'm still sad that he decided to end that podcast. All right. But Selected Shorts used to come on the local NPR station on Friday nights. We didn't have podcasts when Selected Shorts started. And my friends and I would listen to the podcast, 20s and 30-something, right before we'd go out. Yeah, we're going out to the club, but we're listening to Selected Shorts before we go anywhere. I had those kind of friends. And we have a conversation on our drive over, like, did you hear the short story? What did you think about it? You know, what did you think about that voice? Do you think they acted out the story enough? Like, how was that? Just imagine us on the way to the club having this conversation. We get to the club, we'd have whatever time we'd have. If it was a good time at the club, we would talk about that good time on the way home. If it wasn't a not so great time, guess what we talk about? Selected Shorts. We just go back to discussing those stories, all those stories that we heard on the radio. It was a bonding. It was a bonding. And I don't think until today, I realized it was also a ritual. So, thank you. Our Share the Plate recipient this month, is the Latin American Youth Center. We are very familiar with the Latin American Youth Center in this church. The Latin American Youth Center provides over 50 services, including housing, education, and wellness. This organization does a lot of work in the community. If you are in the sanctuary, the ushers will be passing the plate for our offering. You can also text ASCU to 73256. ASCU to 73256. If you're on the Zoom, please click the link in the chat, which will direct you to the online giving. And we thank you in advance for your generosity.
The words of our closing song reflect the ritual. When we share our story from deep inside and we listen with a loving mind, and we hear our voices in each other's words, then our heart is in a holy place. I invite you to rise in body, rise in spirit, singing together. Here we go. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, when we're blessed with love and amazing grace, when our heart is in a holy place, when we trust the wisdom in each of us, every color, every creed and kind, and we hear our voices in each other's eyes, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy, here it is. When we tell our story from deep inside, and we listen with a loving mind, and we hear our voices in each other's words, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we share the silence of sacred space, and the God of our hearts stirs within, and we feel the power of each other's faith, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, when you're blessed with love and amazing grace, when our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place.
Beloveds, a pattern that others made may prevail in the world. But if we hold true to one another, if we hear our voices in each other's words, if we feel the power of each other's faith, if our hearts are in a holy place, then fear not. We will not miss our star, and it shall guide us to beloved community. May we make it so, and amen.